The easiest way to learn who someone really is, the billionaire once said, is to watch what they do when nobody is looking. 3 hours later, a young waitress would unknowingly prove him wrong. Rain hammered the streets of downtown Atlanta, turning the evening rush into a blur of headlights and reflections. Inside Magnolia Grill, the dinner crowd had finally begun to thin. Plates clinked softly. Coffee steamed from white ceramic mugs. The scent of grilled steak and fresh bread lingered in the warm air. Amara Johnson tucked a loose curl behind her ear and glanced at the clock above the bar. 10:47 p.m. Another 12-hour shift nearly finished. Her feet ached. Her shoulders felt heavy. But exhaustion had become familiar. Some people counted their blessings. Amara counted her bills. Rent due in 4 days. Utility notice sitting unopened on her kitchen counter. Her younger brother's college tuition payment due tomorrow morning. Every dollar mattered. Every hour mattered. Yet despite everything, customers remembered her for the same reason. She never looked defeated. Not once. At a corner table near the window sat a man most people recognized immediately. Nathaniel Hayes, founder of Hayes Capital. Billionaire. Investor. One of the most influential businessmen in the country. He had spent nearly an hour in the restaurant alone, reviewing documents while occasionally staring through the rain-covered glass. Unlike most wealthy men who visited Magnolia Grill, he attracted little attention. Expensive navy overcoat, silver watch, quiet confidence, the kind of presence that filled a room without demanding it. When he finally stood to leave, he folded several papers into a leather portfolio, placed cash beside the check, nodded politely toward the hostess, and disappeared into the storm. Amara barely noticed. She was carrying a tray toward the kitchen when something caught her eye. A thick cream-colored envelope resting on the booth seat. Forgotten. She paused, set down the tray, picked it up. The envelope felt unusually heavy. Her stomach tightened. Probably paperwork, she whispered to herself. Then she noticed a small corner had come unsealed. Just enough to reveal the edge of a stack of $100 bills. Amara froze. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade.
$6,000.
She didn't know the exact amount yet, but she knew it was a lot. More money than she usually saw in months. For a brief second, her mind betrayed her. Tuition, rent, groceries, gas. Every problem waiting for her at home suddenly had a number attached to it. A number sitting inside her hands. Then the thought disappeared as quickly as it came. Her eyes moved toward the front door. The billionaire was already gone. No, she said softly. Someone's probably panicking right now. Without another word, she grabbed her jacket from a nearby hook and rushed outside. The cold rain hit instantly. Cars crawled through traffic. Water splashed along the curb. Across the intersection, she spotted a black Rolls-Royce easing away from the restaurant. "Sir!" she shouted. The vehicle continued forward. Amara ran, past parked cars, through puddles, ignoring the rain soaking her uniform, ignoring the curious stares from strangers on the sidewalk. "Sir, wait!" The envelope remained pressed tightly against her chest. 1 block, then another. The Rolls-Royce approached a red light and slowed. Amara pushed harder, her breathing uneven now. Her shoes slipped against the wet pavement. Still she kept going. Because some things belong to other people. And because character, she believed, was what you did when life finally gave you a reason not to have any. The light turned red. The Rolls-Royce stopped. Amara reached the passenger window and raised a trembling hand to knock, completely unaware that the man inside had left the envelope behind on purpose. The window lowered slowly, and warm air drifted out into the cold night. Nathaniel Hayes looked at the young woman standing beside his car. Rainwater ran from her jacket sleeves. Her breathing was uneven from the sprint. Yet her eyes remained steady. Amara held out the envelope with both hands. "Sir, you left this in your booth." For a moment, Nathaniel said nothing. His gaze moved from the envelope to her face and back again. Around them, traffic lights reflected across the wet pavement like scattered ribbons of red and gold. "You ran 2 blocks in this weather for that?" he finally asked. Amara gave a small shrug. I figured you would want it back. Nathaniel accepted the envelope. He did not open it. He already knew exactly what was inside. Did you count it? Amara shook her head. No. Did you look inside? A brief pause. Only enough to realize it was important. Nathaniel studied her carefully. Most people became uncomfortable when powerful men stared at them. Amara did not. She simply waited. Calm. Professional. As if returning $6,000 was no different from returning a forgotten umbrella. Thank you, Nathaniel said. The words sounded almost unfamiliar to him. You are welcome. She turned slightly, preparing to head back toward the restaurant. Wait. Amara stopped. Nathaniel reached into his wallet and pulled out several bills. For your trouble. She glanced at the money and then back at him. That is not necessary. You ran through a storm. That was my choice. Take it anyway. Her expression softened, but she still shook her head. I appreciate the offer, sir, but I did not do it for a reward. The rain continued falling between them. Nathaniel slowly lowered the money. For the first time that evening, something unexpected crossed his face. Not irritation. Not disbelief. Curiosity. What is your name? Amara Johnson. How long have you worked at Magnolia Grill? 3 years. Nathaniel nodded once. Then he handed her a business card. Heavy cardstock. Simple lettering. No flashy design. Just a name and a number. If you ever need anything professionally, call me. Amara accepted it politely. Thank you. She slipped the card into her pocket without even looking at it. That small gesture caught Nathaniel off guard more than anything else. Most people examined his card immediately. Most people recognized opportunity the second it appeared. Amara treated it like a receipt. Useful perhaps, not life-changing. Good night, Ms. Johnson. Good night, Mr. Hayes. She turned and walked back through the rain toward the glowing restaurant windows. Nathaniel remained where he was, watching until she disappeared inside. Then the light changed. The Rolls-Royce moved forward. Yet something unusual stayed with him. A question. By the time he arrived home, the question still lingered. He sat alone in his study overlooking the Atlanta skyline. The city lights stretched for miles beyond the glass. The unopened envelope rested on his desk. Finally, he smiled faintly and pressed a button on his phone. Daniel. Yes, sir? Came the reply. I need you to look into someone. A brief silence. Business matter? Nathaniel glanced at the rain sliding down the windows. Not exactly. He looked at the envelope one more time. Tomorrow morning, go to Magnolia Grill. Quietly. I want to know more about Amara Johnson. The next morning arrived gray and cold. Atlanta still carried traces of the storm. Water dripped from rooftops. Puddles reflected pale sunlight. Inside a small second-floor apartment across town, Amara Johnson sat at a worn kitchen table, staring at a laptop screen that refused to change. The balance due remained the same. $1,287. Tuition payment deadline, today. She rubbed her eyes and glanced toward the hallway. Her younger brother, Caleb, was already getting ready for class. At 19, he carried the kind of determination that made sacrifices feel worthwhile. He dreamed of becoming an engineer. Amara dreamed of making sure he never had to give up that dream. You should not worry about it anymore, Caleb said as he entered the kitchen. I can take a semester off if I have to. Amara immediately shook her head. No, Amara. No, her voice remained calm but firm. You worked too hard to get here. Caleb smiled sadly. So did you. The room fell quiet. Neither of them mentioned the scholarship she had lost years earlier after leaving college to help their family through difficult times. Neither of them mentioned the second job she had recently taken on weekends. Some sacrifices became too familiar to discuss. 40 minutes later, Amara arrived at Magnolia Grill. The lunch crowd had not yet appeared. She tied on her apron, greeted coworkers, and began preparing for another long shift. What she did not notice was a dark sedan parked across the street. Inside sat Daniel Brooks, Nathaniel Hayes' chief of staff. For nearly an hour he watched quietly. Not because Nathaniel needed information. Wealth made information easy to obtain. What interested Nathaniel was something else entirely. Character. By noon Daniel had already noticed several things. Amara greeted every customer by name when she could. She carried trays for a coworker struggling with a sore wrist. She paid for an elderly customer's coffee after discovering he had forgotten his wallet. None of those actions seemed performed for attention. In fact, she appeared almost embarrassed whenever someone thanked her. Daniel made a few notes and continued observing. Then something unexpected happened. Shortly after 1 o'clock, a sharply dressed man entered the restaurant and took a table near the center window. He ordered lunch, spent 20 minutes on his phone, then stood and left in a hurry. 5 minutes later, Amara found a leather wallet tucked beside his chair. She opened it only enough to identify the owner. Several credit cards, cash, identification, nothing unusual. Daniel watched carefully. Here it was. Another opportunity. Another choice. Without hesitation, Amara handed the wallet to the manager and asked him to call the customer before he got too far away. 10 minutes later, the relieved man returned. He thanked her repeatedly. Amara simply smiled and went back to work. Daniel lowered his pen. By now, he was beginning to understand why Nathaniel had become interested. Some people acted honestly when circumstances were easy. Some acted honestly when others were watching. But very few remained the same when life offered them a shortcut. And according to everything he had learned so far, Amara Johnson was one of those rare few. That evening Daniel placed a folder on Nathaniel Hayes's desk. Nathaniel opened it expecting routine information. Instead, the first page made him lean back in his chair. Because the waitress who had returned $6,000 the night before was carrying burdens far heavier than he had imagined. Nathaniel turned another page. Then another. The deeper he read, the quieter the room became. Amara Johnson, age 27. No criminal record. No financial complaints.
No lawsuits. No hidden assets.
Just a long list of responsibilities. Her mother had passed away 6 years earlier after a lengthy illness. Shortly afterward, Amara had left college with only 1 semester remaining before graduation. Not because her grades slipped. Not because she lacked ability. She had left because someone needed to work full-time. Someone needed to keep the lights on. Someone needed to make sure her younger brother could keep moving forward. Nathaniel closed the folder and stared through the glass wall of his office. Below him, Atlanta moved with its usual energy. Cars flowed through intersections. Construction cranes reached into the sky. Deals worth millions were being negotiated in conference rooms throughout the city. Yet somehow the most interesting person he had encountered all week was a waitress earning hourly wages. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Daniel stepped inside. "You asked for the full report." Nathaniel nodded. "I read it. What do you think?" Daniel hesitated before adding, "Personally, I think she is exactly who she appears to be." Nathaniel almost smiled. "That is what concerns me." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Concerns you?" Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. "People are complicated. They hide things. They exaggerate. They perform." He tapped the folder lightly. "Nobody is this consistent." Daniel glanced toward the report. "Maybe some people are." Silence lingered for a moment. Then Nathaniel stood and walked toward the window. Years ago, he might have agreed. Before business betrayals. Before trusted partners manipulated numbers. Before friends became competitors. Success had taught him many lessons. One of the strongest was that appearances rarely survived scrutiny. Yet Amara seemed to survive every question, every observation, every opportunity. It bothered him because he could not explain it. "Arrange something," Nathaniel finally said. "What kind of something?" "A second test." Daniel sighed quietly. "I was afraid you would say that." Nathaniel ignored the comment. "Nothing harmful. Nothing embarrassing. I simply want certainty." Meanwhile, across the city, Amara was ending. Another shift. The dinner crowd had finally faded. Chairs were being stacked. Receipts were counted. She slipped her phone from her pocket and checked her messages. One new notification waited. Her stomach tightened. The tuition payment portal had sent a reminder. Final deadline, midnight. Less than 4 hours away. Amara closed her eyes briefly. She had managed to gather most of the money. Most, but not enough. Not yet. She stepped outside the restaurant and sat alone on a bench near the parking lot. The evening air felt cooler than usual. Traffic hummed in the distance. For the first time in weeks, uncertainty crept into her thoughts. Then her phone buzzed again. A text from Caleb. No matter what happens, thank you for everything. Amara read the message twice. Then a third time. Slowly, a smile appeared. Small, tired, but real. Because even on difficult days, she reminded herself of something her mother used to say. Character is not revealed when life rewards you. Character is revealed when life refuses to. Across the city, Nathaniel Hayes was preparing another test, unaware that the lesson waiting for him had already begun. The following afternoon, Nathaniel arrived at Magnolia Grill without a reservation and without the expensive overcoat that usually announced his presence. He wanted observation, not recognition. The restaurant buzzed with the familiar rhythm of lunch service. Plates moved. Conversations blended together. Sunlight filtered through the front windows. From across the room, he spotted Amara carrying a tray toward a family seated near the entrance. She looked exactly the same as she had during the storm. Calm, focused, unimpressed by anyone's status. Nathaniel took a seat near the back and waited. 20 minutes later, the opportunity arrived. As planned, he stood to leave and deliberately left his wallet beneath the edge of the booth. Not on the table. Not somewhere obvious. Just visible enough to be found by someone paying attention. Then he walked out. From his car across the street, he watched the restaurant entrance through tinted glass. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, the front door opened. Amara stepped outside holding the wallet. Nathaniel felt a small sense of satisfaction. Another prediction confirmed. But instead of searching the parking lot, she handed the wallet to a security officer stationed near the neighboring bank. The officer nodded and took down information. Then Amara returned inside. Nathaniel frowned. That was not what he expected. Curious, he crossed the street and entered the restaurant again. Amara immediately recognized him. Mr. Hayes. Good afternoon. He approached the host stand where the wallet rested. I seem to be making a habit of forgetting things. A faint smile appeared on her face. Maybe you have too much on your mind. Nathaniel picked up the wallet. You could have called me directly. I gave you my card. I could have. Then why did you not? Amara adjusted a stack of menus before answering. Because returning lost property should not depend on who owns it. The words landed harder than she intended. Nathaniel noticed. So did she. For a brief second, silence settled between them. Then another customer called for assistance, and Amara excused herself. Nathaniel watched her walk away. Something about that answer lingered with him. Returning lost property should not depend on who owns it. Most people changed their behavior around wealth. They became eager, careful, strategic. Amara remained exactly the same. Later that evening, Nathaniel sat alone in his office, reviewing quarterly reports when Daniel entered carrying another folder. You are not going to like this, Daniel said. Nathaniel looked up. Why? Because every time we look closer, she becomes more difficult to explain. Daniel opened the folder. Inside were records from local community organizations, volunteer work, weekend tutoring, food drives, small acts performed over several years. None of them publicized. None connected to social media. None benefiting her personally. Nathaniel flipped through the pages slowly. Nobody knew about this? Apparently not. Daniel paused. She never told anyone. Nathaniel stared at the final page. Outside his office window, the city glowed beneath the approaching sunset. For the first time in a very long time, uncertainty entered his thinking. Not uncertainty about a business deal. Not uncertainty about numbers. Uncertainty about his own assumptions. because every test he designed was based on one belief. Given the right temptation, everyone eventually revealed a weakness. Yet the more he learned about Amara Johnson, the more that belief began to crack. And somewhere across Atlanta, sitting at a small kitchen table beside her brother, Amara was preparing for another difficult month, completely unaware that a billionaire had started questioning a philosophy he had trusted for years. 3 days later, Nathaniel made a decision he rarely made. He stopped relying on reports. Numbers could explain behavior. Records could reveal patterns. But neither could explain why one person remained steady when circumstances encouraged compromise. Late Friday afternoon, he walked into Magnolia Grill again. This time, he requested a table in Amara's section. The restaurant was busy. Families filled booths. Office workers crowded the lunch counter. Outside, sunlight reflected off passing cars. Inside, the familiar sounds of dishes and conversation created a comfortable rhythm. Amara approached with a notepad in hand. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hayes." Nathaniel noticed something immediately. Her tone had not changed. Not after learning his name. Not after receiving his card. Not after multiple encounters. She treated him exactly like everyone else. "Good afternoon, Amara." She took his order and disappeared toward the kitchen. 20 minutes later, she returned carrying a tray. As she placed the plate on the table, Nathaniel spoke. "How is your brother doing?" Amara paused. "Only briefly." "He is doing well. Engineering student, right?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, not with fear, with curiosity. "How do you know that?" Nathaniel realized he had moved too quickly. "You mentioned family before." Amara studied him for a second longer before nodding. "He works very hard, just like his sister." A faint smile crossed her face. Someone had to set a good example. Nathaniel found himself smiling back. It was an unfamiliar feeling, natural, unplanned. For the next several minutes, neither spoke. Yet something had shifted. Not friendship, not trust, but a small bridge of understanding. Then an elderly woman at a nearby table accidentally dropped her purse. Before anyone else reacted, Amara stepped forward to help gather the scattered contents. Receipts, reading glasses, medication bottles, family photographs. The woman looked embarrassed. Amara simply knelt beside her and said, "Take your time. Nothing important is ever lost when people help each other look." The elderly woman smiled. Nathaniel watched the interaction in silence. There it was again. The same instinct. The same effortless kindness. Not performed. Not advertised. Simply present. Later that evening, after the restaurant closed, Amara walked toward the employee parking lot. Her old sedan sat beneath a flickering light. As she reached the driver's door, she noticed a white envelope tucked beneath the windshield wiper. Confused, she pulled it free. No name, no return address, just a single folded note inside. She opened it carefully. The message was short, very short. Tuition paid. Keep believing in good things. Amara froze. Her heart began to race. She immediately checked her phone. A new email waited in her inbox. Tuition balance. Paid in full. She stared at the screen, then at the note, then back at the screen again. Caleb's deadline. The amount due. Everything cleared. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she quickly brushed them away. Across the city, Nathaniel sat alone in his office looking out over the skyline. Daniel entered carrying coffee. "You did it anonymously?" Daniel asked. Nathaniel nodded. "Why?" Nathaniel looked toward the city lights. "Because if gratitude is expected, it becomes a transaction." Daniel remained quiet. Nathaniel's gaze drifted toward the darkening horizon. For the first time, he was no longer testing Amara Johnson. He was trying to understand her. And without realizing it, the billionaire who had spent years judging others had just taken the first step toward judging himself. The following week, life felt lighter for the first time in months. Caleb could focus on classes instead of deadlines. The constant worry that had lived behind Amara's eyes seemed quieter now. Not gone, just quieter. Yet one question remained unanswered. Who had paid the tuition? She asked the college administration. They could not tell her. She checked with relatives. None knew anything. The mystery stayed exactly where it began. Meanwhile, Nathaniel found himself doing something unusual. He was thinking about someone else's choices more than his own. During meetings, he caught himself remembering small moments. The way Amara had returned the envelope. The way she helped strangers without hesitation. The way she treated wealthy executives and exhausted delivery drivers with equal respect. One Thursday morning, Daniel entered Nathaniel's office carrying an old archive box. "You asked me to continue digging," he said. Nathaniel nodded. "Did you find something?" Daniel placed a faded folder on the desk. "I think I found something you need to see." Nathaniel opened it. Inside were records from nearly 4 years earlier. Customer service reports, incident logs, internal correspondence. First, nothing stood out. Then he saw a familiar name, Amara Johnson. His expression changed instantly. 4 years ago, one of Nathaniel's companies had nearly suffered a major security breach. A laptop containing sensitive information had been left behind at a downtown coffee shop. The device had eventually been returned. The report described the finder only as a young woman who refused compensation and asked that her name remain private. Nathaniel read the document twice. Then a third time. The address of the coffee shop matched a neighborhood where Amara had worked during that period. Daniel pointed toward a witness statement attached to the file. "I cross-referenced employment records." Nathaniel continued reading. Every detail aligned. The woman who protected confidential company information years ago appeared to be the same woman now serving tables at Magnolia Grill. Nathaniel leaned back slowly. "You are telling me she helped my company before we ever met?" "That is what the records suggest." Silence settled across the office. Outside, clouds drifted over the city skyline. Nathaniel stared at the folder resting in front of him. Most people spend years trying to be noticed by powerful individuals. Amara had impacted his life twice and never once asked for recognition. That realization stayed with him all afternoon. Later that evening, he visited Magnolia Grill again. The dinner rush had just begun. Amara moved between tables carrying orders and greeting customers. Everything about her remained unchanged. She did not know about the old report. She did not know about the investigation. She certainly did not know she had become the subject of conversations inside one of the largest companies in Atlanta. Nathaniel watched quietly from his booth. Eventually, Amara approached with a refill of coffee. "Long day?" she asked. Nathaniel looked up. "Something like that." "Well, coffee helps most problems." A faint smile appeared on his face. "Does it?" "Not all of them," she admitted, "but enough to get through the next hour." As she walked away, Nathaniel looked down at the folder beside him. For years he had believed character revealed itself only under pressure. Yet Amara's character seemed to reveal itself everywhere. In large moments, in small moments, in moments when nobody was watching at all. And for the first time, Nathaniel began wondering whether the most valuable people in the world were not the ones who climbed to the top, but the ones who stayed true to themselves while carrying everyone else upward. 2 days later, a black sedan stopped outside Magnolia Grill just before Amara's shift ended. A man in a tailored suit stepped inside carrying a sealed envelope. He approached the manager first, exchanged a few quiet words, then asked if he could speak with Amara. Curious, she stepped away from the counter. "Ms. Johnson?" "Yes." The man handed her the envelope. "Mr. Nathaniel Hayes would like to invite you to lunch tomorrow." Amara blinked. "Lunch? At Hayes Capital headquarters?" She looked down at the envelope. Inside was a formal invitation printed on thick cream-colored paper. Nothing extravagant. Just a date, a time, and a simple request. Amara thanked the messenger and slipped the invitation into her bag. All evening she wondered why a billionaire wanted to meet with a waitress. By the next afternoon, she found herself standing inside. The lobby of Hayes Capital. Glass walls stretched 3 stories high. Employees moved efficiently through the building. The entire place felt polished, precise, intentional. A receptionist greeted her warmly before escorting her to a private dining room overlooking the city. Nathaniel was already there. He stood when she entered. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me." The meal began simply enough. Coffee, sandwiches, conversation. Nathaniel asked about Caleb's studies. Amara asked about the company. Neither mentioned the mysterious tuition payment. Neither mentioned the investigations. Yet beneath every word sat an unspoken awareness that this meeting was about something larger. Eventually Nathaniel placed a folder on the table. "There is something I need to tell you." Amara glanced at it but did not reach for it. Nathaniel took a slow breath. "The envelope you returned during the storm." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What about it?" "I left it there intentionally." Silence filled the room. The city skyline stretched beyond the windows. Somewhere below, traffic moved through the afternoon. But inside that room, everything felt still. "It was a test," Nathaniel said quietly. Amara stared at him. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she leaned back in her chair. Not angry, not shocked, just thoughtful. "You tested me." Nathaniel nodded. "Yes. And after that?" "I continued observing." Another pause. "Why?" Nathaniel looked down briefly before answering. "Because I stopped trusting people a long time ago." Amara's gaze remained steady. "So you decided everyone needed to prove themselves?" The question landed harder than any accusation. Nathaniel opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. Because for the first time, he heard his own actions from someone else's perspective. Amara folded her hands on the table. "If I had kept the money, you would have judged my character." Nathaniel nodded once. "Probably. But if you deliberately leave temptation in front of strangers, what does that say about yours?" The room fell silent. Nathaniel looked at her across the table. Years of board meetings had prepared him for difficult negotiations. Years of business had prepared him for criticism. Yet nothing prepared him for that question. Because it was not hostile. It was honest. And honesty has a way of reaching places that arguments never can. For the first time since this began, Nathaniel realized something uncomfortable. The person being evaluated all along had not been Amara Johnson. It had been him. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. The city stretched beyond the glass walls, bathed in late afternoon light. Nathaniel looked down at the table and, for perhaps the first time in many years, felt no desire to defend himself. Amara had not raised her voice. She had not accused him of being cruel. She had simply held up a mirror. And sometimes the truth arrived quietly. Nathaniel finally nodded. "You are right." The words surprised even him. Somewhere along the way, I stopped giving people the benefit of the doubt. Amara studied him for a moment. Then she smiled gently. "That can happen when people disappoint us." Nathaniel looked out at the skyline. "More than a few did. That does not mean everyone will." Her answer was simple. Yet it carried more weight than many conversations he had heard in executive boardrooms. A week later, Hayes Capital announced a new initiative. The company would expand educational assistance programs, create scholarships for working families, and establish hiring opportunities for people whose potential might otherwise be overlooked. Reporters praised the decision. Analysts discussed the business benefits. Employees celebrated the investment in people. Very few knew where the idea had truly begun. Meanwhile, life at Magnolia Grill continued much as before. Amara still worked her shifts. Caleb continued his engineering studies. The apartment remained small. The days remained busy, yet something had changed. Not in her circumstances, in the lives she had quietly influenced. One evening, shortly before closing, a familiar black sedan pulled into the parking lot. Nathaniel stepped out carrying a small envelope. Amara met him near the entrance. "You know," she said, smiling, "I get nervous whenever I see envelopes now." Nathaniel laughed softly. "This one is different." She opened it and found a handwritten note. Nothing more. No check. No contract. No offer. Just a few lines written in careful ink. "Thank you for reminding me that trust is not weakness." It is courage. Amara read the note twice before looking up. This means more than you think. Nathaniel nodded. It should. I spent years learning the wrong lesson. They stood there for a moment beneath the warm glow of the restaurant lights. No grand announcement.
No dramatic celebration.
Just mutual respect. Then Nathaniel extended his hand. Amara shook it, and somewhere in that simple gesture the test finally ended. Not because a billionaire discovered an honest waitress, but because an honest waitress helped a billionaire rediscover something he thought he had lost forever. The money revealed her character, but the test revealed his.